Today I'm going to get started on a project that I've wanted to do for quite a while, which is a pair of Damascus serrated steak knives. I've always been a little bit apprehensive to do them since I was a bit unsure of how to do the serrations. And if you watched my failure of a bread knife video, you probably know why. But now I've done a little bit more research and I'm pretty sure I can pull it off, so let's get to work. The steel I'm going to be using for this project is some 0.07 inch thick Alabama Damascus, and that's pretty nice and thin, which is going to be perfect for sliding through those steaks. Now I'm just tracing the pattern from my template onto the bar of steel with a Sharpie. I'm doing around a 4-inch blade with a just over 4-inch handle, which I'm pretty sure should just be right about the perfect size. I went ahead and sketched a second knife onto the bar of steel because unless you want to show up your dining companion with your fancy Damascus steak knife compared to their normal stainless one, it's probably a good idea to give them one too. Now I'm just going to use my portable bandsaw with a bimetal blade to cut out the rough profiles. Now that the rough profiles are cut out, I'm going to head over to the grinder and start using the small wheel attachment and then the flat platen to finish the shaping. When I'm shaping the knives, I always like to use belts that are a little used just because doing the profiling is really tough on the fresh grit, and it's really wasteful to use a fresh belt to do this process. Now that I have the shapes all dialed in, I'm going to use the drill press right over there to start drilling some pinholes into the tang. Here are the holes all finished up. I always like doing 2 pinholes here, and then all these extra little holes are for epoxy to seep into and also for weight reduction. Alright, so now that it's time to heat treat these, I have my even heat going up to 1525 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm also preheating the oil, which is Parks AAA, to around 120 to 130 degrees. And once it's up to temperature, I'm going to go ahead and put the knives in. Now that the knives are in the oven, I'm going to let the oven come back up to temperature, and then I'm going to hold the knives at that temperature for around 10 minutes before quenching them. The blades are slightly warped out of quench, so I just put them in my little straightening jig, which is a piece of angle iron with some clamps, and then I tempered it twice for 2 hours each at 400 degrees. Here's what they look like after the whole heat treating process. They have a nice straw gold color and are pretty nice and straight, and any little bit of warp now I'll be able to take out when I'm grinding them. So now it's time to start doing the finish grinding. My plan for doing the bevels on these serrated steak knives is going to be doing my normal finish grind on these. So I'm going to take it down to the thin edge, and I'm going to go ahead and cut in the serrations using a small wheel attachment. I'm going to be doing the majority of the bevel grinding using a 60 grit ceramic belt. Then I'm going to refine the scratch pattern using a 120 grit belt. Then I'm going to polish that up using 3 different trizect belts. So an A100, then an A65, and finally an A45. Then the final polish is going to be put on using a 400 grit cork belt that I have loaded with some green chromium oxide polishing compound.
When I'm grinding these heat-treated blades, you can see that I like to always dip the knife in the cold bucket of water beneath my grinder, and I do that just to prevent heat from building up and ruining the temper of the blade.
Both the blades are all polished up, and now it's time to do the serrations. I'm going to be doing the serrations on this 1/4 inch small wheel attachment. I'm going to start with this 120 grit belt, and I'm going to move up through the same grit progression as on the main bevels. I also like to turn down the speed on my grinder down all the way around to like 25%, just because that helps me control the serrations.
Here I'm just using an A45 Trizact belt to go back over the serrations that I made using the 120 grit belt.
Here are those serrations all finished up. Now let's reveal the pattern in the Damascus. Before etching, it's important to degrease your blade using some dish soap and water, just to take off all the oils that might ruin the etch. I ran a little string through the holes in the tang of both of the knives, just to suspend them in my ferric chloride acid mixture. And now I'm just going to lay them in there and let them etch for around 5 minutes, and then I'm going to polish it up with some 2000 grit sandpaper. If you don't have the string to pull the knives back out of the acid, the knives are just going to go to the bottom of your container and then you won't be able to get them out. And don't ask me how I know that. Knives have been in there for around 5 minutes, so let's just check out the pattern. Very nice. And now I'm going to use some sandpaper to polish it up to reveal some more contrast. I went ahead and did one more cycle of etching and polishing just to get a little more depth in the etch. And now I'm going to put the knives into my coffee bath to do an instant coffee etch to give the blade a really nice high contrast finish. In there for around 6 or 7 hours, so now they have a really nice high contrast dark finish. So now I'm just going to let them air dry and rinse them off, and then it's time to glue them. If anyone's interested in learning more about that coffee etching process, I already made and uploaded a video about how it works and how I do it. So go ahead and check that out by clicking on this little annotation up here. These knives are going to be part of a 4-piece kitchen set for a customer, and we picked out this really nice curly maple handle that has a blue resin swirl in it. So I went ahead and traced out the profile of the handle onto the material using pencil, and now I'm going to cut it out on the bandsaw. Now I'm just going to use my drill press with a 3/16 inch bit to drill some pinholes to the handle.
Now I'm just going to use some G-Flex epoxy to glue the handle material onto the knife.
I have them both epoxied and clamped up, so I'm just going to let the glue cure overnight, and then tomorrow it's time for handle shaping.
With the blade all taped up to prevent from ruining the blade finish, I start with a 60 grit belt on my small wheel attachment to remove the excess handle material from the bottom side of the handle. Then I use the same 60 grit belt, but this time on the flat platen, to start doing the contouring of the handle. Once the handle's roughly contoured, I remove the flat platen so that I have a slack belt, and then I use a scalloped 120 grit J-flex belt to blend all the contours together. And then the last thing I'm going to do is polish up the handle from 320 grit all the way up to 2000 grit sandpaper by hand.
Here are both of the handles hand sanded up to 2000 grit. Now all that's left is I'm going to polish up the tang and then just put some finish on the handles. Now I'm going to use some of this Hut plastic polish on an old cloth and just buff the handle a little bit to bring out the final shine in the resin. And here are the knives all finished up. And here's the full set of 4 knives that I made for the customer. They all have the same Damascus blade with blue resin and maple burl handles.
And the very, very last thing to do is to test them out just to make sure that they work.
I hope you all enjoyed watching those knives take shape, and if you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you have any other questions about the process, please let me know in the comment section below and I'll do my best to answer them. Stay tuned for the next video and stay sharp.